The tabloid headline screams sicko holds his wife hostage for 30 years, then kills her, cops charge. When Alvin Ridley's wife was discovered dead in her home, residents of the small town of Ringgold, Georgia, assumed the recluse, hoarder, and odd figure naturally murdered her. Idealistic young defense attorney McCracken Poston Jr., still stinging from a failed congressional run, had already encountered the eccentric Ridley, dubbed Zenith Man, for his work repairing televisions, and took the case. His client was belligerent, incomprehensible, secretive, a puzzle for his lawyer. The entire case seemed doomed for failure, until the diligent lawyer looked past the community's biases as well as his own to reveal the astonishing truth.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back.
Hello, everyone.
Do you like true crime? I know we do. Yeah, I like true crime.
I love it.
Yeah. You know, of course, we are Generation X Paranormal.
Yes, we are.
But we also do true crime. And we try to bring you things that are very compelling. And we have a true crime case for you today. It's a very interesting story of a man named Alvin Ridley. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get too far into what it's about because I want you guys to read the book.
Yeah, which
is right here. But it has to do with this man, and he was tried for the murder, potentially, of his wife.
Yes, his wife, Virginia.
Yeah. And we are not going to tell you how it ends because you need to read the book.
Yes, you do.
Some of you may already know the story, but if you do, still buy the book. It's really good.
But you may not actually know the story.
That's right. And you may not have actually read the story or heard the story from the defending attorney, which is just who we happen to have on today.
Yes, we do.
And his name is McCracken Poston Jr. And a little bit about him. He's a practicing criminal defense attorney and a former state former state legislator in the Georgia House of Representatives. Well, that was really tough to get out. Yeah, a little tongue twister there. But he's a graduate of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and received his law degree from the University of Georgia, which he's a notable Bulldog fan. So for you sports fans out there, I think he's a pretty big Bulldog fan, which is, of course, University of Georgia. And he gained national attention for his handling of several notable cases that were featured in CNN Presents, Dateline NBC, which I know that I'm a big fan of that, A&E's American Justice, and Forensic Files, which just happened to be how I first heard about this story anyway. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, what do you think? Should we just bring him on?
Talk to him about his book, Zenith Man, Death, Love, and Redemption in a Georgia Courtroom.
All right. Let's talk to McCracken.
Let's talk to McCracken.
Hey, McCracken, how you doing?
How are you guys?
We're doing great.
Well,
thanks for having me.
Hey,
of course. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor to have you. You know, I'll have to admit, we'll get into it much more, but gosh, this book, Zenith Man, and I'll hold it up so everybody kind of gets a good view of it, but this was amazing. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I was hoping to hear what you thought of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, it just a great flow. I thought the story behind it, and I know it's all incredibly true, but just the way everything kind of flowed, we had a blast reading it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love anything trial based.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are like that. I mean, I don't know. I always like to get into like all the, little nitty gritty things.
Thank you. All the trial testimony in the book, which comprises over half the book, was from transcript.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And so, I had to cut, my problem was I had a contract with Citadel for 90,000 words, and I just went flying into writing the book. And when the dust cleared, I had 177,000 words.
Wow.
And so I had to hack away story, which is the worst thing because I've been compiling it over the years and trying to figure out, okay, yes, that kind of is foreshadowing of that. And I had to cut some of, my baby away, and it was very tough.
Oh, I bet.
But I can also see now how it would have been a disaster had I convinced them to do one big old thick book.
Yeah. It would have been a great anthem, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get kind of into the nuts and bolts of everything.
Well, my name's McCracken Poston. I'm from Ringgold, Georgia, which is in northwest Georgia, just below Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been from this area my whole life. I grew up and born and raised in Catoosa County, Georgia, where Ringgold, Georgia is the county seat. Ringgold is most famous for the place where Dolly Parton and Carl Dean got married in 1966.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And 3 weeks later, a local couple named Alvin Ridley and Virginia Hickey got their marriage license and got married in the same town.
That's awesome.
And by the time George and Tammy got their marriage license in 1969, I believe, Virginia Ridley was nowhere to be found.
And that's where we go. So, kind of already starting into it. I mean, who is Alvin Ridley, and what was the perception in Ringgold? I guess what they had of him before the trial.
Alvin was odd. My sister was in school with him. My oldest sister. I was actually born their senior year, so I didn't have any memories of young Alvin. But in the early 70s, I was, still living at home. I was probably 13, maybe 14. And our TV tuner knob came off. It was a crescent pin with a plastic knob over it. You rip those 3 channels back and forth enough, you're going to wear out that crescent plastic.
Yes.
So I was doing fine with a pair of channel lock pliers on the set, but my father did trade with Alvin Ridley, who had the Zenith franchise, and we bought our TV from him. And Alvin came to fix our TV. The only reason I remember this is because I was watching live wrestling out of Chattanooga, and Alvin shows up, this weird guy, and gives me like a half-hour lecture on how to turn a TV channel changer knob. And then, but the thing that sparked my memory was he told me that he had met Andre the Giant.
Oh, wow.
And that Andre the Giant ate 2 dozen eggs every morning. And he told me something that I passed along to my friends. Hey, I met this weird guy that met Andre the Giant.
Right.
Well, rocket forward decades, and I've got this very strange, non-compliant client. And one of the first non-threatening conversations we had, he mentions he met Andre the Giant, and it all started coming back to me.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, that was you. I actually told your story in school for years that, I knew somebody that met Andre the Giant.
That's really cool how it came back around.
Yeah, and Andre the Giant. Gosh, I remember so many tales of him. Like, I remember when I see a picture of him holding a beer can. It looks like a little tiny.
Those little tiny Coke cans
like
you can get.
Like a little 8-ounce beer can, but no, it's a full 12-ounce beer can. So
yeah. Well, Alvin was unusual, and which was explained much later. But he was also very paranoid about what was going on in the community. His business was inexplicably just shuttered in 1984, and he began to post missives on the inside of the glass of everybody who had wronged him, and how he was going to sue. He actually ran for sheriff of Catoosa County in 1984. I was already interested in politics, and I was working in other people's campaigns. And I remember him at an all-candidate rally on the courthouse steps. And everybody was thinking, oh, gosh, what a joke. Crazy Alvin Ridley is running for sheriff. And he showed up to speak. And he had already filed multiple lawsuits about some minor car accident that his father had in the company truck. An accident that the father drove away from after it was worked. But his father died a couple of years later of pancreatic cancer. And in Alvin's mind, it was all connected.
Right.
And there was litigation. And it was, I wouldn't call it frivolous litigation because Alvin really believed it.
Right.
And so he was very earnest about pushing that. But another part of his plan was he'll just run for sheriff. And I remember him temporarily silencing the hecklers by going up to the microphone with a cassette recorder, and he pushes a button, and it's the sign off for WDEF out of Chattanooga, that 1 a.m. sign off where they played the national anthem.
Oh,
And
wow.
Alvin, got it. You caught a few words of the announcer, and then here's the national anthem. And that crowd, for a minute and a half, however long the national anthem is, they were respectful of him.
Right.
They stood up. They took off their caps. And I just thought, this guy's smarter than he looks.
Sure.
Because
Right.
everybody was just kind of watching for sport how he was going to be, taken apart by the crowd. And he really kind of set the right tone. And there were a few heckles after it, but not as bad as it would have been.
Right.
What a great move. I mean, that if you wanted a very contained audience to tame pretty quick, that'd be one way to do it.
Yeah,
the anthem,
absolutely.
And also a great way to get everybody's attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody
Absolutely.
just standing there at the end of it. You're the first speaker up at the end of that.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
No matter where you are in the lineup.
Right. So, how did Alvin become your client, and what was it about him that made you want to represent him and take on this case?
Well, my book really begins, chapter 1 begins at my humiliating defeat in a race for U.S. Congress. I was in the Georgia State Legislature in the Georgia House of Representatives for 4 terms. And I had gone there as a very young man in my 20s. I had kind of thought I might have a long future in Georgia politics, or I hoped. And the world really changed, and Georgia changed, and I get my ass handed to me in the congressional race. And going through a whole lot of other things in my life, I had developed type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes, which I have 30 years now controlled with an insulin pump, which is fantastic, by the
That's
way.
great.
And I know you've got some listeners. I
Yes.
hope that they can get whatever, our national health care is a mess, but I hope they can get on an insulin pump.
Yeah.
Because
for
with
sure.
the sensors and all that's out there today, it's essentially an artificial pancreas now.
That's
Mhm.
perfect.
So, but anyway, I didn't know that then, and I had a real fatalistic view of, my future at that point. And I'd gone through a divorce, and another opportunity, political appointment, just completely fell through. And so I realized, I need to get back to work. I need to, for the first time, practice law on a full-time basis, because I had been messing around for a decade in politics, and I'd been a prosecutor for a short time, 2 years. So, I'm trying to get my life back together. And then 11 months later, I'm seen out advising, and the strangest, scariest man in town who claimed his wife died, and everybody's response was, "You've got a wife?"
Right.
Nobody in the generation that had grown up there remembered that he had ever been married. The very old people in the community, they kind of remembered that he had a wife, but they knew that she didn't. They thought she had left him.
Right.
And some people thought she had died, including her family, who thought for years he had murdered her and done something with the body.
Right.
So the problem was, because Alvin was so paranoid and his demeanor was such that, again, could be explained later, he just met everyone with this very menacing stare. And he was thinking everybody was out to get him. Well, that's a terrible formula when somebody close to you dies that hasn't been seen in 27 years was actually the last time she was seen. The last place she was seen was in the large courtroom of the older courthouse in Catoosa County, where Alvin and Virginia were being evicted, and Alvin fought it with a jury trial. And luckily, he left a record where I could find that file in the courthouse and found jurors from that case. And at that point, it had been 27 years since that case. Jeez. And so I was finding jurors. Gosh, now it's over 50 years since that case. But I found living jurors, and it was pretty fascinating what they even remembered about the matter of who was Virginia Ridley and where had she been. And that's really what my book explores.
Right. That's, you know, I had mentioned I had something I wanted to tell you right before we got started. And it just so happens, I used to have a job where I traveled all the time. Mm-hmm. And I would be in just constant hotel room after hotel room for weeks on end. And part of my, I hate to say it, my guilty pleasure was watching forensic files before I went to sleep. And, you know, this whole time when we're reading the book and I'm remembering some things, I'm like, I feel like I've heard this before. And then not more than a couple of days ago, I'm YouTube surfing like people do. And I come across the forensic files. I'm like, I've seen that show. I'm like, that's where I remember this from. Mm-hmm. But
well, right after the case, there was a flurry of press just because of the very unusual circumstances of the case.
Right.
Right.
A woman missing for 3 decades, basically. And that drew the tabloids in, you know, with a headline, "Sicko holds wife captive 30 years, then kills her." That was the National Examiner. And it was so tough that at the end of the case, I wanted to set the record straight. And that really was what I wanted to do with a book all along. Mm-hmm. But we went through the most circuitous path to get to this book because I was just giving the story away. Anybody want to talk to me about this? I'm ready to tell about this story.
Yeah.
You remember from the book, the infamous forensic pathologist that I hired.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Turned out to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Right.
He pitched it to Forensic Files.
Oh, did he really?
And was on it. And it made me so mad that when I heard he was going to be on it, I said, folks, this guy was a disaster. Do not let him say anything about this case. And they basically said, and I've been teasing on Reddit, the Forensic Files community includes some of the people that worked for Forensic Files 25 years ago. So I've reconnected with one of the employees, and she said, I remember having the conversation with you that we were going to let the guy be on the show because he pitched the story to us. And I said, he nearly destroyed us.
Yeah.
He does not need this. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to write the book, because talk about some drama. When that was going down in the courtroom, I thought we are lost.
Yeah, and without tipping the hat, that was definitely one of the parts in the book where I'm like, I was heartbroken. No. I'm like, I felt your pain immediately. I'm like, that's it. You know, over.
I just hadn't vetted the guy very well. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I wish him well. Yeah. It's just, but Reddit has a whole thread about him. He's apparently notorious.
Oh, Reddit. Boy, you can get lost in Reddit.
Yes, you can.
So with that, and I know, and it's funny because we live in a small town in the Midwest, and I almost feel like I've met a few Alvins in my time, especially in this area.
And really, well, I'm from a really, really small town.
Absolutely.
And there's always that person in a small town that everyone knows about.
Right.
That's kind of like Alvin.
Not spoiling it, but just so your viewers and my hopefully potential readers will know, if you have a person with autism in your life, you would have figured out Alvin Ridley before I did.
Right.
This was 25 years ago when this was happening. The science on adult autism was not really out there much. The fact that it's a spectrum had only been out a couple of years, maybe 4 years. And the focus seemed to be, and you guys will remember, you were probably in your mid-20s, But you remember people were starting to talk about it, but they were trying to find blame for it.
Yes.
Right.
Like it was a new thing. Autism has been with us for ages. And
Right.
as a matter of fact, some of our smarter, like biggest contributors to our culture have been autistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
Absolutely.
And Alvin Ridley is very autistic, but in a high functioning way.
Right.
He was a laser focused picture tube TV repairman. I cannot find a soul that says he could not fix their television.
Yeah.
And now that the book is out, he fixed everybody's TV apparently.
Oh, I remember him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay because it's a much better and warmer community toward Alvin than it ever has been.
Good.
Yeah.
And so much that on the 22nd of this month, which is 2 days after the release in Atlanta, and by the way, any of your listeners in Atlanta area, February the 20th at 7 p.m. at the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library is where my publisher is decided to launch the book. Then 2 days later in Ringgold, Georgia. But the Ringgold Youth Council, which is a group of high school and college students that kind of learning government and things, they are having an event honoring Alvin Ridley.
Oh.
And I'm telling you, had you told me 27 years ago when I started helping him that they were going to be honoring Alvin Ridley one day, this is just sweet, sweet justice.
What a great turn.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
And Alvin is a guy who loves warmth and affection.
Yeah.
And he was getting none of it 25 years ago. And I even fought with him because I couldn't figure out where he was coming from, why he seemed to be hell-bent on kneecapping all of my efforts to help him and represent him. And of course, you read all of those exploits.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Very much so.
I'm like, this man's a saint.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to what I was kind of driving at was what were obviously hindsight 2020 now that you know, but back then you didn't know, like what were the difficulties in representing him with given the kneecapping, and you don't have to get too far into that, but and he was also in a town that everybody knew him, so they also knew these difficulties. Hindsight not being in play here.
His fourth grade teacher was a little old lady who, as I was preparing for the trial, she made an observation. She said, he cried every day of fourth grade.
Mm.
And I would imagine that Alvin was probably bullied.
Yes.
He was just the kind of kid that drew that response from others, I think. But the more of stories I heard of these incredible stories of Alvin's revenge on these people, and it was verified the other day. He told me of a story of one guy stealing his cap or whatever, and Alvin plunged a long, I guess a needle from a clothing store, like one of those giant needles with a little pearl on the top, and he jabbed it so deep in the guy's arm it stuck in the bone. And Alvin just, told me like he's kind of proud of it, but he'll tell a story that really happened when he was 12, but he makes it sound like it happened last week.
Right.
And this old man called me in my office. His daughter rung the phone for him, and his nickname was Tadpole Byers. And he said, "This is Tadpole Byers. Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I do. I know that Alvin Ridley plunged a needle into your arm one time, and it took $20 to Dr. Stevenson to get out." And he said, "That's absolutely true."
That's so funny.
And so, but then Alvin will tell a lot of stories. He went and served his country in the U.S. Army.
Yep.
And never left Georgia after basic training. But he tells of a sergeant wanting him to fix his TV, so he got like a 3-day pass and brought the TV to Ringgold and then called the sergeant and said, I'm going to need a part. I'm going to need more days at home. And the guy gave him like a week more.
Oh my God.
And Alvin had the TV fixed like when he got home, you know. So his stories are charming now.
Right.
But in 1997, he stalked me on the street, starting 2 days after his wife's death. I didn't speak to him. We just crossed paths. Next day, we crossed the same path at the same place. Third day, on a Wednesday, I realize he's launching from a phone stand, the one that he actually called 911 from.
Mm-hmm.
And this is by design. He is trying to meet me. And so I just stopped and said, Mr. Ridley, sorry for your loss or whatever I said. And that's where we started conversing.
Yeah.
And his face kind of screwed up like a kid that's about to cry, but they can't get that breath yet. They can't get the breath in.
Right.
And he was just like that. And he reminded me so much of a child. And yet he would rage. We would yell at each other. And I will tell your listeners this. There was one time, it was before I learned how to manage him better.
Yeah.
That he was extremely polite to women. So if I just simply had my secretary sit in with us, he was fine. But I didn't realize this then. Mm-hmm. And so he starts to scream at me about the county taking his van. And I would say, Alvin, or Mr. Ridley at that point, this is a murder investigation. And you need to be talking to me about your wife and not the van that was taken in 1984. Mm-hmm. And this was 1998. And he said, no, I don't, because I didn't kill my wife, but they did take my van. And so I had to work around that kind of logic all the time with him. Mm-hmm. Well, at one point, he was winding up to scream at me about all the bad things that had befallen him. And he started in on about the van. And I just, in exasperation, I just said, oh, Lord. Well, he went silent. And I looked at him, and he thought I was praying. And so he literally assumed a child's prayer position with his hands and his head bowed. And I first thought, is he having a stroke or what's going on? And then I realized, oh, no. I said, oh, Lord, he's ready to pray.
Sure.
And I just started basically giving my legal advice to him in the form of an evangelistic prayer.
Sure.
And sometimes it would get loud, and sometimes it was an altar call for sure. Yeah. But it was working because he was respectful enough of religion, and I felt like God would forgive me for doing it if it was moving us along a path of of helping him.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense.
His mind could be still and take the information in.
It's almost like, I was going to say, it's almost like that moment where he can take himself into a different headspace where he can be there, I guess, be there at that moment to help get, information from you without having to get too far down the road in some of the other things he was thinking about at that time.
Well, Jesus wasn't through with us, as it turned out.
Yes.
As you read.
Yes.
So, I learned so much in representing Alvin about people who are misunderstood. And, I'm currently representing an autistic young man who also had other issues and had a seizure. His grandmother calls for an ambulance. And very often, first responders are the law enforcement cops. Mm-hmm. And, of course, when the kid's coming out of his seizure and kind of blacked out state, he's confused.
Right.
Well, resulting in an obstruction charge is very often a person with autism or a person with another developmental disability will end up with obstruction or worse charge, sometimes
Right.
felony obstruction charges.
Right. Yeah.
So Alvin was he was actually very respectful with law enforcement. He let them in the house every time they showed up. I represented him, I advised him and represented him for over a year before he would let me in his house.
Yeah.
And I just could not figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he probably definitely had that, especially having been in the military. I myself have been. You have that immediate authoritative respect, so must have actually really rang true for him. But
what branch did you serve in?
I started in the Navy and then ended in the Army, so I was in two different branches.
How do you do that?
Oh, I asked myself
Is there a transfer portal somewhere?
So, so no, I had served in the Navy for a very long time, but the one thing I always wanted to be was in the medical field, so I wanted to be a medic. But I couldn't get out of the line of work I was in the Navy because we were too undermanned. So I had to actually go into reserve, then go from reserve, basically go blue to green, and then I became a medic. And you know that thing they always tell you, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. Oh, I got it. So yeah, I was a medic for a while, and that's where I crossed paths with this one. And
things happen for a reason.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And as you know, that's kind of what my book is about too.
Mm-hmm.
Unanswered prayers.
Yes,
Exactly.
I'm so glad I didn't go to Congress now.
Yes.
And thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
And Alvin, I got him a hat that says Army Veteran.
No, that's awesome.
To him, that is the most magic hat.
Yes.
Because people will show him respect. Here's now a gentle-looking almost 82-year-old man, and people will go out of their way to speak to him now.
Mm-hmm.
And we really did need a bit of a generation to pass for Alvin to get that kind of respect. But it's really funny. We were eating out in another part of the county in a town called Fort Oglethorpe, where
I know exactly where that is.
And Alvin loves Golden Corral. So we were eating out there, and this guy gets between us, and he says, "Excuse me," and he thanked Alvin for his service and welcomed him home. And I thought, okay, he came back from Columbus, Georgia in 1966.
Yep.
It's a little late, but
he's been home for a while.
Welcome home.
Yeah. That's funny.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's funny when you say these words. I spend a little bit of time in that area, basically in the Trenton, Georgia area.
Yeah, Dade County.
Yeah, and I think
corner of Georgia, the northwest corner.
Yeah, actually, that was the one time I told my wife. I said, "Hey, on this particular trip, I'm going to 3 states all in the same day."
So, yeah, in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, about 15 minutes. Yeah, but no, that's awesome. It's I love that area. Beautiful mountainous area. It's just, I can't say enough great things about it. But
well, thank you. Well, all the people in the book are real. I really felt like I don't want there to be a bad guy in the book,
Right.
Because I was as guilty as any of them in not understanding Alvin Ridley.
Yeah.
I don't think it comes across that way at all.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's just before the time that we understood what the autism is and how they, process things and how they're socially awkward. They fixate on things. And that definitely comes across in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we know, or people that do know what autism is, it's very clear. From the moment you open the book, that's exactly what he's got.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, we didn't know. I mean,
absolutely. And I wanted to show Alvin in a dignified way with respect, but at the same time show what hell I was going through.
Sure.
Right.
Trying to work around some of the more non-typical ways of thinking, neurodiverse is the way it's said now. But my logic did not work on him at all. Mm-hmm. And I get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Alvin today is, and I don't know if age does it. He's sharp. His faculties are sharp. He's got good memories of all our stories. And over the years, well, we go to lunch now twice a week. And I've been in this jury trial now for 3 days, and I got to go back tomorrow. So it's been the longest I haven't had lunch with Alvin in years. But my secretary will kind of look after him, and we get him to the VA. He's driving now is more restricted to secondary roads, but he values his independence, and we're doing our best to keep him independent and able to enjoy life, because he is really enjoying his best life right now.
That's great to hear.
That's good. Yeah.
Still misses his wife, still mourns for her. And this funny thing about the autism that Alvin has, it's often as if his emotions are not aligned with the environment the way we expect of people.
Right.
And that was one of the things they literally used his autistic mannerisms against him at trial.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was understandable back then, but it's inexcusable now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so my call to action is hopefully to address the situation. We've got 5.5 million adults with autism that have never been diagnosed. And I guarantee they are having an inordinate amount of contact with police and courts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just because the way they're presenting, and sometimes, an officer that's not trained may think they're challenging his authority.
Exactly.
When really they just didn't understand what you said, because they're not wired. When Alvin was diagnosed, he asked me to go with him. I found the person to evaluate him that specializes in adult autism. And she had a couple of questions for him. One was, what do these phrases make you feel like? One was, she's gotten under your skin. Well, it almost made Alvin just recoil with, horror of the thought that somebody could get under your skin, literally, because that's the way he's thinking of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And the other one was, he wears his heart on his sleeve. And Alvin's got excited and said, I know what that means. He's got an artificial heart. And he's kind of looking at me because here I have what I call the pancreas in my pocket with the insulin pump. And so he thought he had an answer there, and it was, again, extremely literal.
Right.
About something. We use so much figurative language.
Right.
Exactly.
And our little maxims and metaphors
and
they just fall on deaf ears with somebody with Alvin's condition.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think in the book, to be honest with you, and this is kind of my interpretation, is that it came from a very incredibly vulnerable and honest position.
Yes.
Not giving obviously the story away or anything, or the events that happened, but I have to admit I was very taken aback by how vulnerable and honest you were in approaching, some of the things that you were experiencing with Alvin. And not just that, I think you did a really great job of kind of reflecting back his vulnerability for us to understand. So, no, I think that comes across really well.
Yeah.
Well, I had my late mother and father, when I was trying to write the book, and if you write something that happened, 20 years ago, you may not be completely in line with everything that happened in your life at the time.
Right.
But my mother kept journals, and my sisters and I have been kind of like got them stuck in one of our basements, and because we know that there were some very frank and honest discussions about family goings on.
Right.
And I had an alcoholic parent, my father, and wonderful, loving person. I hate the Southern stereotypical wife beater T-shirt, and alcoholism can run the same gamut of all personalities. My father was a very sweet, loving person who had a severe alcoholism problem, mostly resulting in just being sad and being drunk. And so when I read my mother's journals, because I was trying to figure out, when did I bring Alvin? When did I surprise the family with Alvin, showing up at a holiday? I realized what my family was going through at the time, and I guess I'd put it away, but we actually did an intervention on my father, and who was a World War II era Marine, and
Wow.
worked in a foundry in Chattanooga for 40 years before he retired. But it was during that intervention that I told him, I've been advising Alvin Ridley, and my dad counseled me, and he said, he's odd, but he's a good man.
Right.
And my dad's kindness, I realized that may be the approach with Alvin, because I remember he and my dad got along famously.
Right.
And so I tried to take a different tack with him, and it helped, but it wasn't easy. I still had to go through a lot of humiliation from other lawyers, from judges, from people who they were seeing me turn myself inside out to accommodate this very unusual man. And, there was some teasing.
Sure.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And so I'll just tell them my publishers just ordered a second printing. So.
That's right.
That couldn't put a finer point on it than that.
But you did the right thing.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and I don't think I conscientiously thought that. I thought I was beaten down in life and in politics. I did remarry, and so I was getting happier in that department of my life. But I was beaten down in other ways, and professionally and just in spirit. And Alvin gave me, was a real challenge. And that's really kind of what I needed, was that challenge. And I know, I hope you got the version of the book because I never understand arcs. They go out full of typos. I mean, there's like an obvious typo there. That's not even a letter in the middle of that word,
Yeah.
And and no pictures.
No pictures.
And I've already shamed 3 people for trying to sell their arc on eBay.
Oh.
And I like really, I'm obsessed. I'm a micromanager, and I'm obsessive, and that's part of my story from my childhood, probably. But I've gotten on people like, you're not supposed to sell these, and they like, okay. So
I can assure you, ours is going nowhere.
No. At one point, my opponent that just kicked my ass in the congressional race reaches out to call me. Was that in your version of the book?
I think
it was in a late minute readjustment, and I don't think it made the arc.
Right.
But Alvin believed that the federal government was going to be his salvation. And I later learned that Virginia also believed that the federal government was going to be their salvation. They did not trust local or state government. But federal government, that was something they both had high respect for, and they felt was going to save them. Well, I had just failed running for Congress, and a year later, I'm representing the scariest guy in town. And I'm in the office with him. We're not having that productive a meeting, and because none of them were that productive. And my secretary sticks her head in and she says, "Oh, the congressman tried to call you." And I thought, oh, wow, the guy that completely took me out of politics, he's wanting to talk to me. And I noticed Alvin kind of straightening himself up. Like, I thought, he thinks this call is
in the book.
about him.
Yeah.
And it was the congressman, all right. And the first thing he said was, keep Alvin Ridley away from my congressional office. It's frightening the ladies that work there. Well, I did not want to just completely destroy Alvin's paradigm of the federal government being the good guys.
Right.
And so I walked him out of the car and I said, Alvin, I got something to tell you. And he said, what? And I just thought on my feet. And I said, you know that damn congressman? And he said, yeah. And I said, he hates me so much that if either one of us show up at his congressional office, he's going to arrest us. And Alvin was like bewildered because he knew the guy had whacked me pretty hard. And why would he hate me now? And I said, Alvin, if you'll just cooperate and help me help you, when this is all over with, I'll show you where he lives. And that satisfied him.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's a great pivot. That's awesome.
But internally, it also motivated me.
Yeah.
Because now my pride was on the line. Because here's the guy that took me out of politics, and now he's telling me how my client should behave. And I thought, I gotta win this game.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. No, I it's so funny because that by the way, that did make it in our copy. So I'm glad.
Excellent.
Yeah, we
Excellent.
didn't read that.
I
but
just remembered it when you started talking about it.
But it's just so funny because I definitely get that feeling that given that story that it almost seems like the both of you needed each other at that same exact time.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's a true story.
Yeah.
That's a true statement. And would have never figured it out because he was fighting me at every turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I was constantly questioning myself, did I make a huge mistake here?
Right. So I don't know how to exactly ask this without giving it away, and you can choose to answer whatever you think that you are allowed to answer.
Okay.
I know when you wrote to us about, since we have a paranormal channel, you believe there's some paranormal stuff that may have helped your case. Is there anything that you would like to say about that, or want
first,
to give reference
I
to?
don't think I am as intuitive as a lot of people who maybe empaths or people who I do believe that there are people that feel things and sense things that other people don't sense, and I think I'm on the latter of those two. I think I just kind of bumble through life, and I never really feel the eerie sensation of someone who has departed still being with us. I mean, I've had some weird encounters of things that couldn't be explained, but I just put it out of my mind. But a part of this story was trying to figure out who Virginia Ridley was. And despite scores of law enforcement walking through their house, investigating if they could find evidence of her life or evidence of her being restrained or kept and locked up, and they went all over the house, but they didn't look very closely. And then Alvin just kind of, and I know he wasn't, because he was denying me access to his house, but I surprised him with a turkey plate on Thanksgiving 1998 that my parents made me take him. That's the last place I wanted to go. But I surprised him with it. And I began to realize how transactional Alvin is. And I think that is also an autistic trait.
Yes.
Right.
That if you give something to him, he feels like he needs to give something back.
Right.
And I didn't know what the turkey plate, that was the price of admission to his house. And when I got into his house, I found a lot of very unusual evidence of Virginia Ridley's life and existence. Let's just leave it at that.
Yep.
And it was an ordeal to first gain access to it, obviously. Secondly, use it actually to help Alvin, because he was, again, kneecapping my efforts. But by the time it all came together, and I'll just say that, and this is verified on forensic files, Alvin infested the Catoosa County Courthouse with cockroaches.
Yeah.
It's they interviewed one of the jurors on forensic files, and she's explaining that he insisted on keeping the evidence. And they could tell, the jurors could tell that I was struggling with him, that he was the one in charge of everything. But in coming along with the evidence that I finally got him to agree to bring to court, he brought scores of cockroaches. And it ended up having this incredible reaction because we were next to the judge's office. The judge realized I don't want to be, infested with cockroaches.
Yeah.
So he made us change courtrooms to the connected but separate old Catoosa County Courthouse, built in as a Works Progress Administration project in 1939, Depression era project. But anyway, it's got a grander, big, airy courtroom, and the judge thought, we're going to finish this trial over there. Well, I knew, because Alvin made me do all the ancient case research of stuff that I fought doing, but he insisted that was my giving in. I would have to go look at some ancient civil law research and give him my advice on, is it really dead or not? And he would never accept it. But we were going into the courtroom, which was the last place Virginia Ridley had ever been seen.
Wow.
27 years before. And I felt an eeriness.
Yeah.
Because we're reuniting her with something that she made.
Right.
And the something that she made was going to acquit her husband.
Yeah.
Of the charge of her murder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, it's just not coincidence. It was eerie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've even heard, people on these shows talk about, well, you get into a real cold part of a room or a house
Cold
or
spot.
a building and
Yep.
cold spot. Well, I experienced that in the courtroom.
Did you?
And it was weird. Of course, it was January. And
Sure.
North Georgia does get cold. I mean,
Yeah.
we had some, 20 degrees. But in the old courthouse, which is, got a furnace and they keep it warm, I sensed, and I didn't write this because I didn't, you guys are more experts at it. I didn't want to get the feeling wrong. But I really did feel that Virginia was in the courtroom with us.
Yeah. And I think you can sense those sort of things.
And that's the thing that we can't, impart any knowledge on, because you were physically there. And when you're physically somewhere, you know what you feel.
Yeah.
And so even if the room was cold, that spots can still be colder. There can always be a colder spot than what's around it. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's one of those where the items that the thing that we're talking about that we're not going to talk about, I think that those definitely, I think, resound or resonate quite a bit in that. The cockroaches definitely too, because, those are kind of things that you hear about in some of these paranormal things too, but
right.
Without, again, tipping too much into the story.
Well, and something really weird happened, and I know you read it in the book, but I don't know how much I explained my investigation of it, but I got frustrated with Alvin. And I got frustrated with him on a number of levels. We had a bit of a humiliating day in court because Alvin he would come file separate motions than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, I've got this covered, but no, he doesn't think I have it covered well enough.
Right.
Well, I at least got him to stop calling them emotions, because that's what he would file, an emotion.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty good, actually. I'd like for them all to be called that.
It kind of fits.
I've got a bad mood I'd like to file, Your Honor.
An emotion.
So Alvin, he just frustrated me.
Yeah.
And I was at my wit's end, and I was exhausted, and I finally just said, Alvin, I just lashed out at him for something that I immediately felt bad about.
Yeah.
And it was his hygiene. And the minute it came out of my mouth, why don't you go please to the truck stop and just take a bath? I don't know if I can sit close to you. I wanted to grab those words out of the air and cram them back down in my mouth. The minute I said, he just went into another subject about how he gets the rat that lives in his car out every day. And I'm going like, what are we talking about here? And he would say, well, what you do before you start the car, you get real quiet and then you scream at the top of your lungs. And then the rat will leave the car.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I had to ask, well, how do you know it's a rat? Well, because I see his number 2s all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, Alvin's constantly leaving food in the car. He's a big fast food fan, and so he's baiting that car.
Sure.
Wise. And, mice and rats will eat through wires to get to,
Yes,
food.
Oh, yeah.
And this obviously had access to the inside of his car. So that night or the next night, I was in the office working on the case, and I heard something under the floor. And I could tell it was in the air conditioning duct. And I'm thinking, it's a mouse or a rat, maybe a squirrel. And I thought, I'm going to try Alvin's method. And I lay down on the floor, and I'm trying to listen to my floor on the hardwood, trying to figure out where it is. And it seems to be scampering toward the register. And so I crawl over there army style, and I'm ready to do the Alvin Ridley formulated, here's how you deal with rodents. Screamed, scared the thing to death, but it was a skunk.
Oh, no.
And it sprayed everywhere. And, a skunk doesn't have to be that close to completely ruin your life.
Yes.
And it got on the files. It got on me. It got on my computer in my office. And I had to go to court as cleaned up as I could be, but the files still stunk. And Alvin made a comment about, wow, did you have a falling out with a skunk? That's what he asked me. and I'm thinking, somebody gave me my comeuppance.
Yeah.
Now, what I don't know if I wrote about was the back of my office building, there was a small access door that was usually latched. It didn't have a lock on it, but it was very clearly latched. It was hanging open. And the duct work had a clear slit, as if it was cut open.
Interesting.
And first I thought, did Alvin just completely punked me on something?
Yeah.
And is he capable of that kind of revenge or and then I started thinking maybe Virginia did it to me. She did not like how I was speaking about her husband.
I mean, that is definitely one of those things that make you really think about something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I never mentioned it again. Recently they made him take a bath at the VA hospital when he was getting his cataract surgery. And he described the ordeal. But I realize now, like some people with autism, he does not like the feel of water on his skin.
Yes.
And that makes me feel even worse for trying to get on him for not taking a bath. But I do have the satisfaction of knowing that the VA nurses made him do it.
Yeah.
And so, my secretary and I will buy him clothes. And by the way, I got to get him some clothes for our opening. But as soon as I get out of this trial, but my secretary and I will buy him clothes, usually from Land's End. Product placement. They're not my sponsor. Maybe they'll be yours now.
Hey, we'll take it.
But they got great fast return, and the classic khakis and the classic print shirts and whatever that suit Alvin. So we'll get it for him, and he's really interesting because he'll wear a sports coat, and his hair is always trim and combed perfect. His hair is always that way. And he was always clean shaven. So he had a dignity about him, an old school dignity.
Right.
He gets on to me and says, men shouldn't wear shorts. Well, that's, I'm conscientious about it now, so I don't. anymore, but not around him. But it's really, he had a dignity about him, even when he smelled so bad you didn't want to be next to him.
Right.
I got to tell you though, after the trial, it doesn't bother me. I know he smells the same.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bother me because I've kind of been through war with this guy.
Sure.
He's kind of like a
absolutely
brother, a big brother that,
War is
never
not
made.
always done on a battlefield. Well, at least in the sense of, with tanks and AR, well, your guys' AR-15 or M16, war is war. And that, I agree. You were in the trenches with them for sure.
But you understand him now. You understand why he doesn't. It's just not, I just want to be dirty. It's more of a, I can't stand to have things on my skin.
It's texture things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And he recoils at hush puppies. Not the shoe brand product placement.
Yeah.
But the cornbread, the bread.
Yes.
Right.
And he's constantly offering me his hush puppies because they come with some of the meals that he always gets. And he forgets that I don't like hush puppies.
Right.
And, but his is, I think, more of a textural thing.
Right.
Yeah. The sensory.
Yeah.
Is what they call it, basically.
Gosh, I love a good hush puppy. Unfortunately, we're gluten sensitive, so I don't get to have it anymore. But gosh, those are good.
Yeah.
I get it.
So, really wrapping it up here, McCracken. I mean, we've talked about quite a bit with Alvin,
without talking about it.
Yeah, without talking about it, which is good.
Yep.
Well, and you know what? I don't think we've even said the name of the book.
No, well, I think I did at the beginning, but we're going to do it anyway. I'm going to let you talk about it, and I'm going to hold it right up here.
Well, I've got one too.
Yep, yes, there it is.
And my book is Zenith Man, and that is Alvin Ridley and his wife Virginia, the missing woman for 3 decades.
Absolutely.
That is taken in a photo booth at a little amusement park that's still open in my county. But it was 1965, Lake Winnepesaukah. In Catoosa County, Georgia. And when people are looking up the book, you're going to see there's 2 books titled Zenith Man. Mm-hmm. Well, the other one, which made it on before ours did, is also our story.
Mm.
But it's with different names and a different town name. And 20 years ago, New Line Cinema, with my permission, bought a screenplay from Mark Bailey, who's a writer, whose his wife is Rory Kennedy, the documentarian, and he works a lot with her and writes a lot of the and I've got to be friends with Rory over another case that I had, and she told me about Mark being a writer, and so we started working together on me telling him the story and him proposing a screenplay. Well, New Line Cinema, bought it and held on to it for 5 years. And so we were thinking any minute it's going to be a movie. And then New Line kind of went under, and the new administration revived it. Suddenly ours was a tainted project of the old guys,
Figures.
Mm-hmm.
But I gave them the name Zenith Man.
Oh, okay.
Nobody called Alvin Zenith Man for years and years, but if you read in the book, I was throwing myself a party because I did not have to try the case that term, and it was my birthday, and one of my new wife's friends came down, and he was of a younger generation, and they didn't know him well enough to call him Crazy Alvin, but they knew that building, and they said, "So I heard you were representing that Zenith Man." And I thought, man, that's a great thing to call Alvin.
Yeah.
Other than Crazy Alvin.
Exactly. Oh, for sure.
And I liked it. And so I honored that guy who's now, father with children. I saw him the other night and I said, "By the way, you're in the book. You named the book."
That's awesome.
But another writer, and I'm going to tell you, I overreacted. I've been giving away the story for years. I just wish somebody had asked us just to give input.
Right.
But the fact that she didn't, had I done that, I might have been satisfied that a book was written. And that might have satisfied me.
Yeah.
I think I would always been frustrated in any fictionalization of it.
Right.
Because that was the plan with New Line was, I'm going to let them, I'm not going to complain whatever they do.
Right.
But I'm going to do it factual.
Yep.
And so I was frustrated when it came out, and I was overreactive, and I have since apologized to the woman and said, look, it's fair game, but I'm taking my title back.
Yeah.
And so it's got a subtitle.
Yes.
But it couldn't, to me, it couldn't be anything but Zenith Man.
No, you're absolutely right. That's perfect.
Even though young people don't know what Zenith was.
No.
No, they don't.
They sure don't.
And they'll never know the pain of vice grips on a channel changer.
Oh, yeah. Gosh.
Even walking across the room to turn the channel.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You send your youngest child.
Yep.
To
Yep.
But it's coming out February 20th. I don't know when when your podcast drops. Is it?
It will be, I think, a couple days after, actually.
Right.
Oh,
so
exciting. So it'll be available. So
it'll be available right now.
I can tell your readers that it's available for instant delivery from all the major booksellers and should be in some stores. So Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, and Target and Walmart.
Oh, that's awesome.
Great.
I'm very excited, and I'm very honored that you allowed me to come on because it's not a full-on paranormal story, but there's some weird things happening in it.
For sure.
Absolutely. And it's definitely true crime, so it already fits it. So.
Yeah, we do cover true crime as well, so we're not just, paranormal, because honestly, true crime, if you really break it down, is kind of paranormal when you look at, all the different things that happen. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, I want to invite your viewers to come to Ringgold, Georgia one day. I would love to see Alvin's story create a little, true crime tourism.
That'd be great.
The shop where he used to be his shop is now a coffee shop.
Oh.
I like his shrine to Virginia. I've kind of built a shrine to him with significant articles, People Magazine, Washington Post. But I've also got because Alvin took the rest of them back, and Virginia's, the things that we're talking about, they were already deteriorating.
Yeah.
But I have preserved about 4 of them, and they are on display at the coffee shop.
That's fantastic.
So, but I'm very accessible. People can email me, postonlaw@gmail.com, my last name, and Poston, POSTONLAW@gmail.com, and ask me any questions. And you can send Alvin messages, because we love sitting together after it's been on Forensic Files again for like 20 years. I wish I got royalties, but we got nothing. We did it for free. But man, I haven't had to buy a phone book ad in 20 years because I get such good coverage from that.
Yeah.
So, but if you'll email me, I will read Alvin your email and send you back a picture of Alvin during one of our lunches.
That's perfect.
I love that.
Well, please pass on our well wishes to Alvin from us, because it was great reading and knowing his story, and me piecing together that I had once heard this before too. So
yeah, that was how we snuck up on people. We got in your subliminal mind from forever being on Forensic Files, and then that sounds familiar.
Well, I'm just so glad that he has you, because I mean, at the basis of the story, it's a man that was misunderstood, probably bullied a lot, made fun of, and he lost his wife, the one person that really saw him. And so you're a good man for sticking by him all these years, and
we were
staying
having
in touch.
We were having lunch the other day, and there's in the coffee shop, and I can't remember the song, but it was a classic, like Roberta Flack, "First Time Ever I Saw Your Face." You remember that song? It's a beautiful song. Well, I'm just, enjoying lunch, and Alvin has me look things up. He has a flip phone.
Oh, okay.
Let me just tell you, he does not need a smartphone. Alvin would get in so much trouble
Sure.
with a smartphone.
Yeah.
So he's got a flip phone, but I will look up things for him. And it's kind of sad because he'll come up with a name, and usually it ends up with an obituary.
Yeah.
But, he talks about girlfriends he had when he was in the Army, and he's telling me that she used to be a go-go dancer, and I'm thinking she's 80 now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but he's in his heart. He's can get right back with them, and
Right.
he hopes that that he gets a couple of girlfriends out of this.
Well,
Oh, look at that.
But he is
You never know.
obsessed. He gets through the air digital channels. Now you have to have a box, but your old set can work still.
Yes.
But I don't know how it is where you live, but it's kind of like old reruns of old series usually. And the occasional new series, which he's obsessed with, called Cheaters. And he's really worried that if he gets more than one girlfriend, he's going to be on Cheaters. And I'm thinking, when Cheaters comes and does the Alvin Ridley expose, that's going to be
the big one.
Destination appointment television right there.
For sure.
That's so cute.
Well, listen, McCracken, I can't think of any better way to end it than that. That kind of tops it all right there.
Well, thank you. And please again, I hope your readers will enjoy the book. I hope they will learn something about their own selves with it, because sometimes the unanswered prayers are the best prayers.
100%.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. The honor's all on our end. And, guys, if you're listening or watching this, please go out and buy this book. It's a fantastic read.
But the one with the kissing couple on the
the one with the kissing couple, not the other one. But fantastic read. And thank you again, McCracken, for joining us.
All right. Y'all take care.
You too. That was great having him on, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. To be able to talk to the man himself.
Yeah, he's very funny. And I guess you guys probably noticed that just in the interview, but what a great guy to talk to.
Yeah, he's a very kind man.
Yeah, he's and it's just interesting, and I mentioned that in the interview, that it just seems like it's interesting how they found each other at the same time when they needed each other.
Yeah, well, life sometimes works like that.
Sure does.
Especially with the paranormal involved.
Yes, absolutely.
Things kind of fall together in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, and guys, it really just depends on, when you read the book, how you formulate your own opinion. We know a lot more about Alvin and some of his challenges that he has, more than we did, obviously, during the trial and things like that. So, we never tell anybody how to feel about any particular thing, but
no.
It's a great telling of two people that needed each other. It's much more than just a, I don't know, like a law story. Like right.
Let's go into the courtroom and defend someone. It's very much so a human story.
It is a very much so a human story. You're right.
And a kind person standing up for another kind person.
Right.
And that's not always an easy thing to do.
No, it is
just kind of like he explained. I mean, you feel sometimes when, you try to do something right, you feel bad about something because things can be frustrating.
Yeah.
In certain times in life. And but that doesn't mean that you're a bad person for feeling that or thinking that at the time.
Right.
I mean, we're only all human until we're not.
Until we're not. Until we're paranormal and ghosts.
If we go that way. You never know. But, I mean, it's a great, if anything, it's just a great story. So, you know what it kind of reminded me of? A little bit. I love these type of true crime stories.
Okay.
Ever since I was a kid, and me and my friend, there was one summer that we watched A Time to Kill with Matthew McConaughey in it.
I can explain.
Like the entire summer. Like over and over and over. Now, it didn't help. I mean, it did help. that it was Matthew McConaughey. Because we both had some crushes on him during that.
I bet.
But that story like really kind of awakened me to adulthood and the way things can happen. And honestly, even though the story is not similar at all, it kind of is a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
To me, like the lawyer trying to represent someone that's not working with him, and they're kind of button heads. And then how McCracken mentioned like one of his expert witnesses didn't work out. Same thing happened in The Time to Kill.
Sure did.
You remember when he thought he had had it in the bag and it like completely fell apart? It reminded me a lot of that actually. And it's in a southern courtroom, like Georgia, and then A Time to Kill was in Alabama? I think, something so. Like that. Yeah. So it did a little bit as I was reading it remind me of that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So hopefully, Time to Kill was a book.
Yeah. So
maybe Zenith Man will do just as well.
And maybe we'll see a movie on it.
We might. That would be really cool, actually. But, no, it's a great book. I really enjoyed it. You should go out and read it.
Go read it.
It's out now. Because it went on sale on February 20th, so this is a few days after. So go and get it and read it. And let us know what you think. Yeah, let McCracken know what you think.
Yes. Let Alvin know what you think.
Yes. Because I am sure he would love it to know that people are reading his story.
Yeah. Well, on that, hey guys, thanks for checking us out, and subscribe. Make sure you hit the like button because that does help. But surprisingly enough, that does help us quite a bit. But at any rate, thank you again, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.